So in 12.2 we've implemented a concept called workbenches, which solves two problems. First of all, it allows you to easily save custom tools to a form, and secondly, it gives the user an enormous amount of control over customizing forms that already exist and also creating forms of their own. So by default there are going to be two areas in which workbenches exist. It's going to be a workbench area in tools. Now currently it's just a tab on the modeling palette, but it's probably going to end up being a button along the top with the other tool palettes. So it exists there, and it also exists in the top right hand corner next to kits. So this area where the kits used to be is now a workbench. So what is a workbench? Well, a workbench is just a form which is editable from within the UI. So you notice this form here has got a button that says edit workbench, and when I check that we get another number of other options. Now the main feature here is this second button. Obviously we need icons in here. When I click this button, this activates a feature called pick to add. So now as I mouse around the UI, you can see all the buttons pre-highlight green, which means they're available to be added to a workbench. So I can click on anything within the UI. So if I wanted polygon selection mode to be on in this workbench, I can just click it and it'll get added. So if I wanted to add something from one of the tool forms, I could just open that up as a floating palette, pick to add, and then I can just add a tool from there. Let's choose a few more. Element move, vortex, bulge. There we are. So we've got a few in there. So when the workbench is in edit mode, if I mouse over the buttons that are in the workbench, you can see the pre-highlight red, which means I can drag and drop within the form to move things around. So if I want bulge above element move, I can just drag it and reposition it like that. The first button here allows me to add a divider, so if I click on that, it gives me a divider, and again I can drag and drop that where I want it to be. If I right click, I can also add a divider with a label, and then I can drag some other tools below that, and then that allows me to have a collapsible divider. So if I turn off edit workbench, I can collapse that. So I just want to go back to pick to add for a moment, because again it's not just buttons that you can select. So if I select this camera, turn on pick to add, see now when I mouse over channels and properties, they can also be added. So if I want a particular channel and edit field inside the workbench, I can just click on it and that will be added. And also if I open up the command history, if I turn on pick to add, I can also click on any command that's been fired and that will be added. So while the workbench is in edit mode, if you right click on a button, it gives you a kind of mini form editor. So you can add a label, a tooltip, change its style, or add an icon. You can duplicate it. You can open it directly in the main form editor, and of course you can also delete it. So let's look at the rest of these buttons. So this button will open up the full form editor. And now if I open up a tool palette and run a tool, say the tube tool or the pen tool, if I come to this drop down, this will give me a list of the last used tools or commands, and it'll give a list up to 10, and you can just add it to the workbench directly from this list. So if I click add pen, that will get added to the workbench. But there are other things that we might want to add to the workbench. For example, tool presets. So if I create a tool preset, create a really simple one, just a move tool with a background constraint. I come to the workbench now, I click edit workbench, and from the drop down I can choose add current tool pipe and save preset. So if I click that, I can give it a name. It's OK, and that gets added. So if I drop that tool and then click on that, it'll run the preset again. So what about macros? Well, if I record a macro, stop it, go to Edit Workbench, and from the drop down I can choose either add recorded macro and save to a file, or to the config. So I'll save it to a file, and I'll just put it on my desktop. And there it is. So if I turn it off, select the polygon, run it, I can run the macro straight from the workbench. Now if that macro is saved on disk, then we can also locate it and open it directly from the workbench. So if I click Edit Workbench, right click on the macro, we've now got these two options: Reveal in File Viewer or Open in External Editor. And finally, you can also add things from Script Editor. So if you have a script in the editor, click Edit Workbench, and then from the drop down you can choose Add Script from Script Editor. Ask it to save it somewhere, save, and you'll get a button. Now what you can also do is load a script directly from disk into the workbench. So from the drop down you can just hit Add Script, and from a desktop I'll choose this one, hit OK, and I'll get a button. Now just like the macros, when I'm in edit mode, if I right click on the button for the script, and I get three options: Reveal in File Viewer, Open in External Editor, and also Open Python in Script Editor. So if I click that one, it'll open that script directly in the editor in MODO. So this is the vertical version of the workbench, but there's also the horizontal version of the workbench, which we can find by the Kits button here. Now the functionality is exactly the same, the only difference being is you can't have dividers in the horizontal workbench. Now what's nice about having the workbench up here is it solves the kit problem, which is something I've been having sleepless nights over for the last 6 months. So in 12.1 we put the kits into this form to kind of stop them. You know, if you've got lots and lots of kits on your system, you can easily kind of flood MODO modes to the point where that form could actually become unusable. So we put them all in here as a kind of a central location for those kits now. But now that we've got workbenches, we're giving the power back to the user to be able to put their kits wherever they want in the UI. But by default, they can initially put them back into this area. So it just allows them to manage it better. So if I click on the button to make this an editable workbench, go for the drop down, I'll click Pick to Add, and then I can just select one of my kits and it'll get placed into that workbench. Now what you might have heard me say there was you could put your kits anywhere you want in the UI, and you can, because any form in MODO can become a workbench if you really wanted to. For example, I'm over here in the Basic tab. Let's open up the form editor, and if I find form, the model here, and then open up, go to the Basic. So every form now in the form editor has this new option at the bottom for customizable workbench, and when I activate that, we now get an Edit Workbench button in that form. So if I make it editable, I can pick to add. I'll go to my kits, and I've now added the Unreal Bridge kit at the bottom there. I can turn it off, and then if I no longer want to see that Edit Workbench, I don't want it to be editable anymore, I can just decheck that, but that kit is still there. So there's one last thing which I forgot to mention, and that is that you can also add presets into a workbench. So I'm going to make my workbench editable. I'll bring up my preset browser, pick to add, and you can see these are now pre-highlighting green. So you choose that preset and maybe that preset. If I click on them, it'll load.